Hi there, I'm Ashley with Mama Needs a Manual, and today I'm so excited. I finally finished a post I've been working on for a really long time. It's actually one of the reasons I started the blog in the first place, and that is talking about tantrums. If you have a 1.5-year-old to probably getting close to a 4-year-old, you're probably in the thick of it with tantrums. I've been in that place for the last couple years, and so I was at a loss in the beginning of what to do, and I read a lot of books. I asked a lot of questions. I listened to some books on tape because, let's be honest, who has time to read a whole book whenever you have a lot of little kids? And so I've come up with some tools and I've tried to organize them for you guys. And so I came up with this acronym for the word tantrums. And the post ended up being incredibly long. And so I decided to break it up into 8 posts. And so we're going to have one each day this week plus a day. And I'm going to go over each letter each day in a video as well. For those of you who have no time to read, I thought this format might be helpful. And so the first T is for training versus discipline. Now, some of you might be all-stars when it comes to working with little kids, like my mom and my sister. They're just so gifted in that area that it just is second nature to them when it comes to how to talk to toddlers, how to interact with toddlers, what things to teach them. Others of you, like me, have to think about it and really work through it because it doesn't come as easily. And so I want to talk about what this means. So in general, there's a training piece and there's a discipline piece. Now the training piece is what happens before the discipline. So training, if you want to think about it, can be a lot like practicing for a sport. So there's this whole idea of drill and practice. And so when it comes to training our kiddos, keep that in mind. There's this piece that we need to teach them how we expect them to behave before we require that obedience or before we discipline them and punish them for something they didn't even know was an expectation in our home. So it's really important to keep that in mind. Also, we want to keep in mind the fact that we need to give our kids an opportunity to learn. And so to help you remember that, here's my little visual for you. This is a tummy time pillow that we used a lot over the last few months with our littlest one. He doesn't really need it anymore because he's rolling all over the place. But if you're a mom of a baby, you know tummy time is really, really emphasized, and that's because of the Back to Sleep campaign, and babies don't spend that much time in their tummies anymore, so they're not developing their muscle strength like they used to, and they need that opportunity to learn how to push up and to strengthen their neck muscles and to learn how to roll over and to learn how to crawl and sit up and eventually walk. So tummy time is really crucial, and so often it's easy to keep your baby in a bouncy seat or a carrier or just hold your baby. And so tummy time, even if it's painful and even if your child hates it, is important because it's teaching them, it's giving them an opportunity to learn some skills they're going to need that are going to be builders for other skills later on. And so in general, keep that analogy in your mind, and you can apply that to your 2-year-old, your 3-year-old, your 4-year-old, your 10-year-old, that you want to give them an opportunity and a place to safely learn, and to sometimes fail and to sometimes struggle, and then to push through to success. So you can grab this free printable, by the way, on my website if you subscribe to my email list. I promise I won't spam you. You can get a link to that free printable so you can put it on your refrigerator, because I know if you're anything like me, I'll read a book and I'll think, oh, that's a great idea, or I'll read a blog post and then I just forget it because we have so many other things going on in our mind. And so I figured if I put this on the refrigerator, it helps me remember, oh yeah, have I tried this thing? And when you're in the midst of the craziness. So T is for training. Now, one of the things that I mentioned already is that we need to talk about our expectations when we see our kids break a rule for the first time. So, for instance, when I first was around 8 months old, he started throwing everything, all toys. He thought he would throw them, including cars. And these things, he didn't have Matchbox cars then. He had softer or bigger plastic cars, but still we wanted him to know that you don't throw cars. And so we would often tell him, no, we don't throw cars. We would stop him. If he threw one, we would stop his hand. We would say, no, you don't throw cars. You can throw balls. So that's an example of using a can statement. And I tried to do that whenever possible. So if my kids are running, I say, no, we can't run inside, but we can run, and they'll say outside. Or if they're yelling, no, we don't yell inside, but we can yell outside, or we can whisper. They think that's fun. So sometimes it's good to not only tell your kid what they can't do, because then they just feel like they're just being put in a straitjacket all day long. Like, no, no, no. It's sometimes good to say, you can do this. Focus on the positive and not always the negative when you're teaching them your expectations. Now, after they know the expectation and then they break it, then that's when the discipline piece comes in, which we'll talk about later on with some of the other letters. But this is just setting up the fundamental expectations in your home. So I don't think it's fair to punish my kids if they didn't even know they weren't supposed to throw cars in the first place. But once they know that, then it's fair to hold them accountable to that standard. Another thing you can do is make training fun through games, like Come to Mommy. Many of you have probably heard of this. The idea is that you could put your kid on the other side of the room, even as early as like 9 months old or whenever they start crawling, and say, come to mommy, and wait until they come to you. Or if they don't come, then pick them up and make them come to you. So the idea here is that you're making this fun, and it's not in a high-stakes situation. They don't have to really come to you in that moment, and for their safety's sake, it's not like they're about to run into the street and you say, come to mommy. This is something you're doing at home whenever they're not in trouble, and you're just practicing it. You're making it a fun game. And so my boys think it's so fun if they're in another room and we yell, come to mommy or come to daddy, and they run to us. And so the hope is then whenever we really need them to come, that they'll come to us. And if they don't come to us later on, that's again where we might have to send them to timeout because they didn't come to us. They didn't follow our rules. But this can be a fun way to just train them what they're supposed to do when you say come. They're supposed to come, listen. It's a drill and practice thing. Red light, green light can be another fun thing to teach them how to stop and how to go. And Simon Says can be a game for listening. And another idea that I heard when I was in college actually is the idea of a conversation being like tossing a ball. And so we're trying to do this with our boys. They're not quite old enough to fully grasp it, but we're hoping they'll understand soon. And the idea is that we teach them, and we ask a question to them, like we say, how was your day? And we toss the ball to them. They answer how their day was, and then they're supposed to say, Mommy, how was your day? Or what was the best part of your day? And then they toss the ball back to us, and we answer the question. And no one likes a ball hog, so you're not supposed to just hold on to the ball. You're supposed to toss it back by asking a question. And so that's just like some teaching social skills. Another one that's really easy to do is talk about expectations by discussing what-if scenarios. And so you can just do this over lunch. You can do this when your kids are eating a snack or just sitting by you and you're wanting to talk with them and connect with them during the day. You can ask them a question like, what do you do if your friend is playing with a toy and you really want that toy? Or what do you do if a friend takes the toy out of your hand and pause and let your child come up with the solution? You're teaching them how to think about a possible conflict and learn how to make peace. And so in our house, we often fight over cars. And so something that we've asked our boys to do is, what do you do if your brother took your car? And then often they'll say, I find another car. Or sometimes they might try to trade, see if their brother wants to trade, or they just have to wait it out and take turns. But there's no grabbing a car out of your brother's hand, and there's no grabbing a car out of a friend's hand. And so that's something that just is something that you can talk about, and then later on you can reference. So then when your child is losing it because their toy got taken away, you can try to go back and reference, what do you do if someone is playing with the toy you want? And hopefully it'll help them calm down and remember that they can find another toy or take turns. Along with that comes the idea of teaching manners. So it's like giving them the proper vocabulary, teaching them to say please and thank you. If they're little, you can teach them to say more, please, sign language. Oftentimes our boys love these things, and at first they wanted a pouch. They would say and we would not give them a pouch if they said So the training piece was to say, no, you need to say more please, or you need to say verbally, may I have a pouch please, depending on where they are in their verbal skills. And so don't give in to that demand, don't give in to that whining. You're training them, you're teaching them what is the appropriate way to ask for something. And so that's part of training. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is to focus on building relationships with your kids. I know some days I am so exhausted and I feel like all day long I'm just focusing on doing the basic things like washing the dishes and doing laundry and getting dinner ready and feel like I'm in the kitchen all day long, and I haven't had that much time to connect with my boys. And so sometimes my parenting ends up being just barking commands from the kitchen. Hey, don't hit your brother, and on those days, it can be really hard to have obedience for my boys. If I haven't spent very much time connecting with them, then they're not as likely to listen to me. And so I have a book to help you remember that. My boys love reading. And so one of the ways we connect is by they come and sit in my lap and we read to them. And so if you're spending time with your kids, doing what they love doing, coloring, painting, running outside, connecting with them, then they're much more likely to receive this training piece from you. They're going to want to please you when you're connecting with them. And that piece works for education as well. You focus on relationship, and then discipline doesn't become as much of an issue. Now, there's still a place for it, of course, and we're going to talk about that in the next videos. So follow along. Again, if you want this, subscribe, and we'll talk about A tomorrow. Thanks, guys.